In just a few minutes, we're going to be in John chapter 12 together, continuing our series we've been in, walking through the Gospel of John. But before we go there, I just want to say how much I appreciate our missions team that was in Southeast Asia and what they shared last Sunday. And I don't know about you, but I was so challenged and so convicted by what they shared, and particularly with our responsibility and the responsibility of every believer in sharing the gospel and making it known. And that was just so challenging to me, and I appreciate what they shared. And it's also why I'm so excited about an opportunity that we have for you coming up in January. Nick shared the awesome story how God had kind of brought him full circle from 20 years ago, being the guy sitting on the train, scared to talk about Jesus, to the same guy 20 years later sitting on the same train in the same country and sharing Jesus with somebody else. And I think most believers, most followers of Jesus, we all want to share Jesus, don't we? We want to make the gospel known. But the thing for most of us is we're just scared, right? And we just don't know how. I want to talk about him, but how do I get there to doing that? And if that's you, I get it. And don't think that just because, I'm a pastor, it's easy. I'm an introvert by nature, and conversations are hard for me. It's much easier for me to stand up here and talk to you than it is for me to talk to you after church and one-on-one. Conversation's tough. I'm a natural introvert, and so for some of us, it's just hard in general. And we come to having those conversations about the gospel and talking about Jesus. We were talking in our community group this week. The hard part so many times in our culture is just how do you get the conversation started, right? How do you get over the bridge to talking about it? Because there's a couple things that are taboo in our culture today. The only two things you can't talk about in the workplace and in polite society, if you don't bring up politics and you don't talk about religion. You can be as religious as you want to be, but we just don't talk about it, right? And so how do you get over that bridge to just talking about Jesus? And most of us want to, we just don't know how to, and we're scared we won't know what to say. I'm always the guy who, I can tell you what I should have said 2 hours later. I am a great debater if you give me time to, I'm always the guy driving home in the car and I go, oh. That's why I've never won a fight with my wife in all the years we've been married. Because I lay in bed in the middle of the night and go, oh, that's what I should have said. But you can't wake her up then, the fight's over, right? And a lot of us are that way. We're scared. I'm not going to know what to say. It's going to be awkward. They're going to ask me something I don't know. And that's why I'm so excited about a class we're going to be offering in January called Tactics. And we, as Christians, we all have a strategy. Big picture, our strategy is go into all the world and make disciples and to proclaim the gospel. Tactics are how do you go about carrying that strategy out. And this class is going to run through January during second service. So for all of you, it's easy because you're already first service people, right? And early service people are awesome, by the way. And I'll say the same thing to the second service crowd. But early service people are awesome. And but you can come to first service and plan on staying for that class in second service. And this is something I promise that you can do. Because if I can do it, you can do it. And it's all how to have gospel conversations with people in a way that's completely natural and completely easy. And it allows you to stay in control and never be on your heels and control the conversation in doing that. Wouldn't that be awesome? And so plan on staying. That'll be second services in January. I hope you'll join us for that. It's going to be pretty exciting. And that's all I have to say about that. John chapter 12. I think anybody that's going to be in sales, if you're going to be an effective salesman, or at least in any kind of retail sales, that to be a good salesman, you've got to learn to instill a sense of urgency in the customer. Like you need them to feel like I have to make this decision right now, whether I'm going to make this purchase or not. They need you to feel that urgency because they know if you think about it, you may make a different decision. And if you don't think that's true, just go to any new car lot in town after church today and test drive a new car. Talk about how much you like the car. Go through the whole process, Drive it, talk about how much you like it. Go back in the office, talk about what the payments are going to be. Get way down the process. And then tell the salesman, you know what? I think I'm going to go home and think about it overnight. And I'll call you back tomorrow and we'll get back with you on what we decide. They will throw themselves around your ankles, right? In order to keep you from leaving that car lot. because they want you to make a decision now while the new car smell is still in your nose. And while the gleam of the chrome is still glittering in your eye and you can still hear that awesome sound system and you've just been in this car where everything works. And you drove into the car lot on a beater that's 19 years old. And they just want you to think how awesome it would be to have that car and not be fighting that car anymore, right? And so they'll do anything to keep you there. And what can we do to get you in this car today? Because they know if you go home and actually do think about it and you get past that moment, you're likely to sit down and get some sense into your head and go, wow, I really don't know if we can afford this. And they know that if you think about it, you might actually look at what insurance will cost on that brand new car versus the 20-year-old car. And you might stop to think about depreciation and what that brand new car will be worth after you make 72 easy payments. And a lot of retail sales is that way, and that's why you see things presented to us all the time, right? As this is the sale of a lifetime, right? Once in a lifetime deals. There was a furniture store, some of you may remember, it was at like 40th and Riverdale. It was going out of business for 15 years. You remember that store? Going out of business sale, half off, 2 weeks only, for like 15 years. It just went on. And you'll see those kinds of sales all the time. You got to buy it now. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. We've never had deals like this before, right? Urgent, do it now, because you may miss out. And the implication is you're going to miss out on this awesome opportunity when the reality is that in most cases, if you're just patient, you could find the exact same deal the next week, or an even better deal, and the week after, and the week after. But there are certain times in life when we do come up against opportunities that really are urgent, where there's things that we need, decisions that we need to make now, or we will miss out. My wife's dad wanted to take my mother-in-law to Hawaii for years and years and years. They'd planned this trip to Hawaii. In fact, he planned all sorts of grand and wonderful trips that they were going to take as soon as he retired. We're going to go to Hawaii, we're going to go here, we're going to see this, we're going to do that. All of these grand plans as soon as he retired. And my father-in-law was the hardest working man I think I have ever known. Grew up in poverty, way below the poverty line in Kentucky, and determined that he was going to provide better for his family, and he worked like a dog to make it happen. All the years that I knew him, 70 hours a week would have been a light work week. I mean, he worked 2 jobs full-time all the time, just worked like an animal. But he had all these grand plans of all these things he was going to do until he got lung cancer and died at 52. And they never did see Hawaii. You know, you plan, I'm going to tell my family, I'm going to tell my mom how I really feel about her. I'm going to say, I love you. I'm going to be reconciled until you get the phone call that said they had a massive heart attack. And they passed away in the night, and opportunity is gone just like that. We say, I'm going to be a better husband. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be there for my wife. I'm going to stop treating her the way I treat her. I'm going to make changes. I'm going to, until the day you come home one day to a note on the table that says, I'm gone and I'm not coming back. And the opportunity's lost. All of us as parents say, I plan to spend quality time with my kids. I'm going to spend more time with them. I'm going to teach them to know Jesus. I'm going to teach them to follow Jesus. I'm going to do all of these things. And tomorrow becomes tomorrow, and you wake up and you blink, and they're grown and they're gone. Some opportunities really are opportunities that we need to take care of now while we have the chance. And in our text today, Jesus shares one of those opportunities with us. In fact, he shares the opportunity of a lifetime. And just to set the stage, in John chapter 12, beginning in that chapter, we've embarked on the last week of Jesus' life. And so everything from here on out in John's gospel is just detailing the events of the last 7 days of Jesus' life. And he started saying unusual things that he's never said before. Bobby shared a couple weeks ago, he says earlier in the chapter, he always said through the Gospels, my time hasn't come, my time hasn't come, my time hasn't come, over and over again. He would heal somebody, he'd do something completely awesome, and he'd go, shh, don't tell anybody. My time hasn't come. And then in John chapter 12, he starts saying, my hour has come. My time has come. And the time for his death was at hand. And so we see him praying just a couple verses prior to where we're going to read today. He prays and says, Father, I just want you to be glorified in this and in everything that is getting ready to happen. And God the Father's voice actually thunders from heaven in return that I have been glorified and I will be glorified. And while all the crowd's trying to figure out what on earth just happened and what did we just hear, that's where we pick up today in verse 30, John chapter 12. It says, Jesus answered, this voice has come for your sake, not mine. This voice you just heard, it was for you, not for me. I know God's going to be glorified in this because the whole reason I came was for God to be glorified. This happened for you because you've been saying, give us a sign, give us a sign, give us a sign. And Jesus says, here's just one more sign that I am from God and that I am who I say I am. And big things are getting ready to happen. Now, he says, now is the judgment of this world. And now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. And then John adds this parenthetical note, just in case we're not following along, to make sure we get the significance of what he was saying. Jesus said this to show what kind of death he was going to die. Jesus says, now the moment has come. And it wasn't just any moment. This was the moment of all moments. This was the moment that all moments from the very creation of mankind, ever since mankind first sinned, and humanity and all of creation fell into brokenness and fell into sin. Every moment from that moment to this has all been working toward this one moment in time, where when Jesus was lifted up on the cross, sin was finally and completely and ultimately defeated. And Satan was finally and completely and totally defeated. And as Jesus hung on the cross, literally bearing the combined weight of the sin of all humanity and all of the wickedness and all of the evil and all of the hurt in the world, as he hung on the cross, the floodgates of God's grace were thrown open, making it possible for all of us to come to him and to be reconciled to God, that you do not have to try to please God by being a good person, because you can't be a good person. You don't have to try to earn God's favor by working hard, because you can't earn it. And you don't have to try to prove your worth to God, because Jesus has already demonstrated on the cross that you are of infinite worth and infinite value. And all you have to do to receive everything that God has is stop and turn to him. It really is the deal of a lifetime. My wife has been into recently all of these true crime TV shows, like Forensic Files, where the whole show, they go back and they try to solve cold cases using modern scientific methods. And so she really enjoys those shows. And she was watching a documentary the other day, I think it was on Netflix, that just came out on Henry Lucas. And I didn't see most of it, and I was in and out through the program. But if you're not familiar with Henry Lucas, he was a serial killer who was active in the United States from 1960 to 1983 was the year that he was arrested. His first murder was he killed his own mother. So, and according to him, he killed his mom because they got in an argument about who was going to take care of her when she got older. And he didn't want to do that, so he killed her. That's the kind of guy we're talking about. He was eventually, when he was first arrested, he was arrested in 1983 for 2 other murders in Texas. One was the murder of an elderly female that he'd been hired to take care of, and the second was a teenage girl that he'd been kind of drifting through Texas with. Those were the charges he was arrested on. But the fascinating part of the story happened after Lucas was arrested and in jail, and he began to confessing to other murders. One murder after another, after another, and after another. And according to him, he had killed over 300 people. And as the investigators got to talking to him, here's the fascinating thing. He would tell them all of these details of crime scenes and all of these details of victims that he had killed that it seemed like nobody but the killer could possibly know. And he would take them out to the crime scenes and go, yeah, the body was right here, and this is what they were wearing. All of these details. And so the detectives began clearing all these cold cases that he was confessing to. And detectives and authorities joining states began hearing about it and going, I wonder if he could have been responsible for some of these open cases that we have. And he started copping up to them, and he kind of did this tour all over the western United States where he's taking authorities to crime scenes saying, yeah, I did it, here's how it happened, and giving them all of these details that they're going, he had to have done it. How could anybody else know? So he confessed to all of these other crimes. But it turned out after the fact, some other people got to looking at all of these crimes he had confessed to, and they're going, wait a minute, I don't think he could have done it. Here's evidence showing he said he did this murder in Arizona. Here's proof he was in Florida when the murder took place. So it's a head scratcher going, how did he know all of this if he didn't really do it? And we're still not certain today how many people he's responsible for killing. He died in prison in 2001. It may just be, and probably is, Henry Lucas may have just been one of the most brilliant liars the world has ever known. He was a pathological liar, would lie about anything and everything, just lied all of the time. And one psychologist in that program had the theory that, and you can tell even when you look at the pictures of him, you can just tell something's not quite right. Then he's not, all the wires aren't connecting. And he's got that one eye that droops a little bit that it turns out is from his mom hitting him in the face with a 2x4 when he was a kid. So she was no saint either. And one psychologist theorized that there may have been damage done to that part of his brain that helps you determine reality. And that any gaps there were, his brain would just fill them in. And so he would go to these crime scenes, and whether the story he didn't know, his brain would just fill it in. And he might not have known whether he was actually lying or not. It might have actually been real to him in his head. And he was great at reading people. And so it may just be that he could talk to these detectives and he could just read what you wanted to hear and tell you what you wanted to hear. And so, anyway, fascinating story. We're not certain how many people he might be, how many deaths he might be responsible for even today. And I say all that to say this. There was a point in that documentary where I happened to be in the room, and they're interviewing Lucas in prison, and he says to the interviewer, he starts talking about how he had met Jesus in prison, and he had become a Christian. And the fascinating thing is how Miley, my daughter, and my wife and I were all in the room, and all of us reacted in almost the exact same way. Oh, come on, give me a break. Yeah, right. He met Jesus in prison. Yeah, everybody, you know, those jailhouse conversions. Everybody meets Jesus in prison. And even more and more disturbing, and I felt almost immediately guilty by it, even more disturbing is this kind of attitude that we all had. What? He gets away with killing 100, 200 people, and all he's got to do is turn to Jesus in prison, and he gets off scot-free, and God gives him a clean slate? That ain't right. That shouldn't happen. And that is poor thinking on my part. As one of my friends likes to call it, that's stinking thinking. But there's part of us that thinks that way, isn't it? There's a part of us that says, yes, we know we're saved by Jesus, but he really came to save people who are basically pretty good folks. Yeah, we're all sinners, but yeah, he saves sinners like me and you who are just normal, respectable sinners. Sinners who goes to church on Sunday, but pedophiles and serial rapists and mass murderers, no. It shouldn't be that they just get to turn to Jesus and they get off. That's not right. And I want you to realize this morning, that's exactly how scandalous God's grace is. It's mind-blowing. And that's what the Jews in Jesus' day were struggling with, and the people listening to him in the first century, because they all thought, hey, we're pretty good with God because we're decent sort of people. We're the Jews. We have Moses. We have the law, and we strive to keep the law. We're pretty good folks. We go to church on Sunday. We keep the 10 Commandments. We pay our tithes. We try to do all of the right things. And the average person in our culture today is not much different. The average person on the streets, they have this sort of, whatever their concept of God is, whatever nebulous picture they've created of God in their own mind, they kind of have this idea that if there is a God and I stand before Him one day, I'm going to be okay because I'm a pretty good sort of person. And we can always find people to compare ourselves to that are way worse than us. There's always a Henry Lucas that we can go, I ain't as bad as that guy. And we think we're going to be all right because we're pretty good. The danger in that thinking is a lot of us carry that kind of thinking over into our walk with Jesus, where we go, yeah, we're saved by grace. But I'm also a pretty good person, and I go to church on Sunday, and I go to community group, and I pray, and I read my Bible, and I do all of these other things, and that certainly probably helps a lot. When the reality is it doesn't help at all. The reality is that it's just as scandalous that God would save somebody like you as it is that He would save somebody like Henry Lucas. It's every bit as scandalous that the serial pedophile can turn to Jesus and find grace and forgiveness. It's every bit as scandalous that God offers the same grace to you. Because we're just as broken. We don't deserve it any more than they do. That's the opportunity that Jesus presents to us. It's all Him and it's zero us. That if we just turn to Him, we get everything God has. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. But Jesus also says it's not just the opportunity of a lifetime, it's a limited time offer. Most of us are familiar with the metaphor, the imagery of Jesus being light. One of the 7 I am statements of Jesus in the Gospel of John that we looked at several weeks ago, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And most of us are comfortable with that imagery. But the imagery Jesus gives us in this chapter and in other places in the New Testament, Jesus presents Himself here as a fading light, which may make us a little bit more uncomfortable. But Jesus has been saying things like this for a while. He said back in John chapter 4, He told the Pharisees, I'm not going to be here for very long. He tells His disciples in John chapter 14, just a little bit longer, and I'm not going to be with you anymore. He told His disciples back in John chapter 9, that we have to do the work that my Father sent me to do now while it's still light, because the time of darkness is coming. So while we have the light, do the work of the light. And so it's not unfamiliar imagery that Jesus uses, but it's maybe the strongest here in this passage as we continue in our text. 34. So the crowd answered Him, we've heard from the law that Christ remains forever. How can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? And I think kind of what they're saying here is, hey, we've been studying the Old Testament, Jesus, and our understanding of the Old Testament is that when the Messiah comes, when Christ comes, He's going to remain forever. And now you're saying the Son of Man must be lifted up, that the Son of Man is going to be crucified. That doesn't mesh with our understanding. So who's this Son of Man that you're talking about? You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means, if you allow me to quote Princess Bride. You keep talking about the Son of Man. What do you mean when you say it? Because that's not what we mean when we say it. And that's kind of the question they're asking. And Jesus continues by saying this. Verse 30. Jesus said to them, 35, the light is among you for just a little while longer. So you see the imagery there? It's a fading light. The light is among you for just a little while longer, so walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtakes you. The one who walks in darkness doesn't know where he's going. So while you have the light, and so again, it's not going to be here forever. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of the light. I think what Jesus is trying to get those Jews, first century Jews, to see here is that, listen, I am not going to be around much longer. My time on this earth is coming to a close, but I'm here right now. I'm standing in front of you now. and this great opportunity to be my follower. It's grand and it's awesome, but it's a limited time. I'm not going to be here much longer. You need to decide now what you're going to do with me. It reminds me of the story I heard about a guy who went to the doctor. And he'd been having these massive headaches for a long time, and he wasn't sure what was wrong, so he went to the doctor. They didn't know what was wrong, so they, ran the battery of tests on him. And a couple of weeks later, the doctor calls him back into the office to go over the test results. And the doctor says, "Sir, I am so sorry to have to be the one to tell you this, but your test results are in, and it looks like it's terminal. And there's nothing we can do to help you." And the man says, "Man, that's horrible, Doc. How long do I have?" And the doctor said, 10. And the guy goes, "Well, what on earth does that mean? 10 what? 10 years? 10 months? How long do I got?" And the doctor said, 9, 8, 7, 6. Bad joke, I know. I'm aware. The point is, we don't know how long we have. And that's what Jesus is trying to get them to see here. I'm not going to be around forever. If you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus, the time you have to make a decision one way or the other for Him, it's a limited time offer. But you have to decide what you're going to do with Jesus. The day is coming, and it could be today. None of us are promised tomorrow. You could be killed in a car accident on the way home. You could have a heart attack before this service is over. You don't know. Today could be the day when Jesus returns. Fingers crossed, amen? Jesus could come back today, but the point is, after you're dead or after He returns, it's too late then to decide what you're going to do with Him. You'll still bow before Him as your judge, but it will be too late then to bow before Him as your Savior. And you hear the urgency in Jesus' voice here. Walk in the light before the darkness overtakes you. Now is the time to decide what you're going to do. And there's a sense, too, for those of us who are followers of Jesus. We have the awesome privilege of, we've never enjoyed Jesus' physical presence with us, but in a sense we enjoy something far better because Jesus is risen and He is ruling and He is reigning and He is the head of the church and He's given us His Holy Spirit that indwells us. And we have His promise that I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. And so we have it way better now than even they did then. But there's a sense, too, that it's true for us that we live in sort of this twilight zone where we are surrounded by darkness and we're surrounded by people who don't know Jesus. And the opportunity for us to make a difference for Him and for His kingdom, it's for a very limited time. And most of us are really good in most areas of our life, aren't we? At someday, at tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to eat more healthy. Tomorrow I'm going to start exercising. Tomorrow I'm going to be more disciplined. Tomorrow I'm going to do whatever. We're really good at just going tomorrow, 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 aren't we? And we're really good in doing that with our walk with Jesus too. That tomorrow I'm really going to start walking with Him. Tomorrow I'm going to get serious about sharing the gospel. Tomorrow I'm going to really make some changes. Tomorrow I'm really going to, tomorrow becomes tomorrow, and 20 years later we're right where we were 20 years ago. When the opportunity is limited, we don't know how long we have to make a difference for the kingdom. So the time to live for Jesus, the time to walk with Him is now. So He says we've got this opportunity. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. It's a limited time opportunity. And He says the opportunity all begins with belief. Let's go back to our text again. He says in verse 36, while you have the light, believe in the light, so that you can become sons of light. For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that whoever believes in Him will have eternal life. So all we have to do to take advantage of this awesome opportunity is believe in Him. Some other translations have this verse as trust in the light while you have the light. And that's kind of the idea Jesus is getting across. It's not believe as just a mental fact. Everybody listening to Jesus that day believed in him in that sense, right? Because he's standing right there in front of them. They believed that Jesus was, because there he was. They had seen his miracles, most of them. They were aware of his miracles. They knew all of that had happened. They believed in him, but they didn't trust in him. They didn't believe in him in that sense of trusting. Which is sort of trust in the light, believe in the light. It's kind of an odd thing to tell somebody to say, because if there's anything that we all do, we all trust in the light, right? We all love light. I bet every person here this morning, I bet your home is wired for electricity. And when it's dark, I bet you turn on a light, don't you? When you get in the middle of the night and you got to use the restroom, you turn on a light. When you're trying to read a book and you can't see, you turn on a light. When you get in your car and it's dark, you turn on the light. When I go backpacking in the middle of the wilderness, I take a headlamp so I can see in the dark. We love light. You wouldn't think we would have to be encouraged to believe in the light or trust in the light. But spiritually speaking, we have become so accustomed to living in darkness that we do have trouble trusting the light. The opportunity that Jesus gives us, it seems too big and it seems too grand and it seems too good to be true. It's not that we can't see the light, it's that we have trouble trusting the light. My wife and I were foster parents for several years, and one of the most awesome things we've ever done, and one of the things that they taught us in those classes has always stuck with me. You know, foster care gets a bad rap sometimes on some foster homes, and most foster parents they're doing it because they love kids and they want to help these kids while their families are getting their lives together, and they do it for all of the right reasons. And the instructor said in one of those classes, if you are going into this because you have visions in your head that we are going to take these kids in that are needy and they're broken and they're suffering for whatever reason, we're going to take these kids in and we are going to love on them. And we're going to give them a safe place and we're going to give them security until they can go back home. He said, if you have in your mind that you are going to take them in and they are just going to fall all over you with thanksgiving, and they're going to fall all over you with gratitude for all the awesome things you're doing for them, you might need to think again. Because he said, whatever hellhole it was that they came out of, and sometimes it was bad, whatever hellhole they came out of, that's their normal. And they just want to go back where things are normal. They're not going to appreciate everything that you do for them. They're not going to appreciate your rules. They're not going to appreciate your structure. They're not going to appreciate all the sacrifices you're making for them. They just want to go back where things are normal for them, no matter how bad it was. And we found that to be true. And there's a sense in which the same thing, I think, is true for us spiritually. That Jesus says, just step into the light. Just trust me, just believe in the light. But we are so broken and so screwed up and so fouled up that even though we're miserable, it's our normal. Darkness is all we know. And so even though when we look at it honestly, we realize I have ruined my life. I've never made a wise decision. I've never done any of the things God's asked me to do. And it's making me miserable. It's all I know. And so because it's all we know, the light is scary. And somehow, even sometimes as Christians, we have this amazing ability, and I don't understand why we think this way, that we think the life that Jesus is calling us to is somehow inferior to the life that we have. And you see how that makes no sense at all. We think that somehow the good and gracious, kind, loving God who's graciously offering to forgive all of my sins and adopt me into his family, the life he's calling me to lead, where I can be united with him and be what I was created to be in the first place, somehow that life is superior to this hell that I'm living in. When Jesus is saying, just trust me and find out that I'm trustworthy. Trust is an accumulative thing. You can't be close to somebody that you don't trust. I can say in all honesty, I trust my wife much more now than I did 24 years ago when we were first married. It's not that I didn't trust her in 1995 when I asked her to marry me. It's just that I trust her infinitely more now because for 24 years she has put up with this stubborn, perfectionist, anal doofus. And for 24 years she has held my hand when I'm an idiot. And she's walked with me when I didn't deserve it. And she's stuck it out with me when she deserved far better. And she's proven herself trustworthy over and over and over again. And so as a result, I trust her much more now than I did even then. And that's what Jesus is asking us to do. Just trust me, and you'll find out that I'm trustworthy. Psalm 34 says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Just step into the light and you'll find out he's way more trustworthy than you can imagine. The little girl standing on the end of a diving board trying to get the courage to jump into the deep end of the pool for the first time. And that's a scary thing when you've never done it. And she's trying to get the courage to jump for the first time, and her dad's down in the water saying, "Go on, jump, I'll catch you, I'll catch you." That little girl doesn't really trust her dad until she jumps. Trust doesn't happen until there's that split second where she is in midair. And she doesn't know if dad's going to catch her or not, right? That's where trust occurs. It doesn't occur on the diving board. It doesn't occur until she jumps. And then she jumps, and dad does catch her. And she finds out dad is trustworthy. And then for the rest of the day, some of you parents know, the rest of the day, all it is dad catch me, dad catch me, dad catch me, dad catch me, dad catch me. And then after they learn you will, they don't even wait, right? You'd be standing with your back turned, and they're like, "Dad," and you turn around, and they're already in midair. They've already jumped. It's because they've learned dad is trustworthy, and if I jump, he'll catch me, and it doesn't matter if he's looking or not. And the same is true of our walk with God. Taste and see that he is good. Walk in light. While you have the light, just step into the light and you'll find out God is trustworthy. And there's one thing that's true of Jesus that's not true of any other person in your life. I don't care what relationship it is, the people you are closest to in your life and how much you trust them. There's one thing that's true. Every other human being is going to let you down. They will prove themselves at some point to be not trustworthy. They'll say something they shouldn't say. They'll do something to hurt you. They won't be there when you need them. That'll never happen with Jesus. If you just taste and see that he's good. If you just step into the light. If you've never done that, today would be the day. If you are a follower of Jesus, to use an old phrase, make hay while the sun shines. That's essentially what Jesus says. Walk in the light while you have the light. Let's pray.